The moment you pluck a crisp, vibrant apple off a tree, a biological countdown clock basically starts ticking.
It really does. It's immediate.
Right. Because without the tree's life support, that apple isn't just, sitting there. It is fundamentally programmed to self-destruct.
Exactly.
So, welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive. I'm your host, and we have a massive stack of sources on the table today, created specifically for you.
Glad to be here for this one. We've got a lot of ground to cover.
We really do.
Yeah.
We are looking at these comprehensive manuals on food dehydration, and they span everything from modern kitchen hardware to critical pet safety protocols, all the way back to ancient historical preservation practices.
Yeah, it's quite the spectrum.
It is. And our mission today is to cut through all the overwhelming noise out there. We're giving you a shortcut to being well-informed about food preservation.
So you can optimize for self-reliance, maximize your nutritional density, and ideally, completely eliminate waste.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can talk about how to actually save our food, we really need to understand the mechanism of why it's actively trying to decompose from the second it's harvested.
Right. I mean, we tend to look at fresh produce on our kitchen counter and just see vitality and health,
Sure, it looks great in a bowl.
Exactly. But from a microbiological standpoint, fresh food is a liability. Biological matter relies on a constant flow of nutrients and energy to maintain its cellular walls.
And once it's picked, that's gone.
Right. The second you sever that connection to the soil or the branch, those cellular defenses just drop.
The sources paint a pretty vivid picture of what happens next. When fresh food just sits at room temperature, it becomes, to use my own term here, a luxury water park for germs.
A luxury water park. That's actually the perfect way to visualize it.
I thought so.
Because fresh food is mostly made up of unbound water. We're talking about free-floating moisture that isn't chemically tied up in the food's molecular structure.
And that unbound water is the issue.
It's the ultimate breeding ground. Pathogenic bacteria like Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria, along with various yeasts and molds, they absolutely thrive when they have access to free moisture.
So they just move right in.
They essentially swim into the food, feed on the abundant sugars and proteins, multiply at these exponential rates, and leave behind toxic metabolic byproducts.
Yikes. And even if you could somehow keep a piece of fruit perfectly sterile, like sealed away from any outside germs, it still sabotages itself.
Oh, absolutely.
The manuals spend a lot of time on something called enzymatic autodegradation, which sounds intense.
Yeah, those are essentially the built-in self-destruct buttons. Fresh food contains intrinsic chemical catalysts called enzymes.
Okay.
And while a plant is alive, these proteins are highly regulated, right? They facilitate natural, gradual ripening.
But once harvested, I'm guessing that regulation just stops.
Exactly. The regulation stops and the enzymes just keep working unchecked. They act like microscopic scissors, constantly snipping away at the cellular structure.
Ah, so that's why sliced apples turn unappealingly brown in minutes.
Yep, or why firm tissue eventually softens and collapses into mush. And it's also why your vital water-soluble vitamins degrade so rapidly just sitting in a bowl.
Which makes our modern grocery habits incredibly precarious, if you think about it.
Oh, heavily precarious.
Because we rely so heavily on fresh food, which is usually, 75 to 95% water weight.
At least, yeah.
It's bulky, it's heavy, and keeping it from turning into a moldy swamp means we are entirely dependent on the fridge trap.
The fragile, unbroken power grid.
Exactly. A simple power outage or delayed delivery truck, and thousands of dollars of food can just rot in mere hours.
What's fascinating here is the precise physics of the counterattack. Because dehydration isn't just about blowing hot air on a strawberry.
Right, there's actual science to it.
There is. The primary scientific objective is deliberately lowering what we call the food's water activity, which is denoted in the science as AW.
Okay, AW. And this is different from the total moisture content.
It is. Water activity measures the vapor pressure of water in a substance compared to pure water.
Wait, let me make sure I'm getting this. So we aren't just measuring how wet the food feels.
Yeah, not at all.
We are measuring the specific water that microorganisms can actually access and drink to survive.
You nailed it. Pure water has an AOT of 1.0. Fresh food typically sits at a dangerously high water activity level of about 0.99.
That's basically just water.
Yeah. And to put that in perspective, pathogenic bacteria generally need that level to be greater than 0.91 to multiply.
Okay.
Molds are a bit hardier, requiring a level greater than 0.80, But when you systematically dehydrate food, you drop that water activity below 0.60.
And what happens at 0.60?
At that critical threshold, microbial cellular structures are completely paralyzed.
Wow.
The biological decay is frozen indefinitely, and you do all of this without relying on a single drop of chemical intervention or a refrigerator compressor.
Knowing that physics completely changes the whole game. So now that we understand the goal is dropping that water activity below 0.60, how do we practically apply this to our own pantries?
Well, we have to start with the right approach.
Right. Today, according to the specific guidelines we're pulling from, our human consumption focus is strictly on the vegetarian spectrum, plant-powered preservation.
Yes, starting with plants makes the most sense.
But the sources point out that you can't just, leave things out in the sun anymore. You really have to choose the right hardware.
Yeah, the manuals contrast two main hardware approaches in the modern kitchen. First, you have your vertical flow dehydrators.
Those are the budget-friendly stackable tower models you often see in big box stores, right?
Exactly. They have a fan at the very top or the very bottom pushing air vertically through the trays.
But the airflow is inherently flawed with that design, because the food closest to the fan is getting blasted with heat, while the food farthest away is barely getting a breeze.
Which means you have to constantly babysit the machine. You're rotating the trays manually every few hours.
Which introduces human error and just inconsistent drying.
Right. Which is why the premium standard is the horizontal flow dehydrator. These look more like a standard box oven or a microwave. The fan is mounted in the rear, blowing air horizontally and evenly across every individual shelf at the exact same time.
So no tray rotation needed.
None. And crucially, it prevents the flavors of different foods from mingling. The horizontal airflow carries the moisture straight out the front door.
Rather than blowing the garlic fumes from the bottom tray up into the strawberries on the top tray.
Exactly. Nobody wants a garlic-flavored strawberry.
Definitely not. But the preparation of the food itself is where I really started to get tripped up in the reading.
Yeah.
Because you can't just slice an apple and throw it in the box.
No, you have to stop those molecular the enzymes first.
Right. The sources recommend dipping fruit slices in an ascorbic acid solution or a mix of lemon juice and water for like 5 minutes.
That acidic intervention is required to lower the pH on the surface of the fruit. This forcefully neutralizes the enzymes responsible for that brown oxidation.
Got it.
And once the browning is halted, fruits, which are naturally high in sugars and acids, are processed at a steady 135 degrees Fahrenheit or about 57 degrees Celsius.
Done when they are pliable and leathery.
Wow.
Now, here's where I have to push back on the manuals a bit.
Oh.
Yeah, because the instructions for tough-skinned fruits like blueberries and cranberries, they seem completely counterintuitive.
Ah, the checking process.
Yes. We are trying to aggressively extract water from these berries, but step one is a technique called checking, where you plunge the berries into boiling water for 30 seconds and then throw them into an ice bath.
I know, it sounds weird.
Right. How does throwing fruit into boiling water help dry it out?
It sounds like a contradiction, but think about the biology of a blueberry. It is basically a tiny waterproof balloon designed by nature to hold moisture inside during hot weather.
Okay, that makes sense.
If you just put a raw blueberry in a dehydrator, the waxy skin acts as an impenetrable barrier. The heat will cause the berry to swell, but the moisture can't escape.
So by dropping them in boiling water for just half a minute and then shocking them in ice, you cause the tough skin to rapidly expand and contract.
Exactly. And that creates microscopic fissures all over the surface.
Ah, so you are intentionally cracking the armor. You're giving the interior moisture a physical escape hatch.
Precisely. Because without those microfissures, you run the risk of something called case hardening.
Case hardening.
Yeah, that's when the outside of the fruit dries too quickly and forms a hard shell, permanently trapping the remaining moisture deep inside the core, which will eventually lead to hidden mold.
Oh, wow. That makes total sense. Now, vegetables are a completely different biological structure.
Very different. They are low in natural sugars and low in acid.
So a lemon juice dip won't work. The sources are incredibly strict here. Vegetables require a quick hot bath. You steam or boil them for 2 to 5 minutes, then plunge them into ice water.
That blanching process is non-negotiable for almost all vegetables. Because they lack the natural protective acids of fruit, heat is the only way to quickly denature and destroy the enzymes.
The ones that would otherwise cause the vegetables to lose color and flavor.
Right, and nutritional value during storage. Blanching also relaxes the tough structural fibers of things like carrots or celery, allowing the moisture to release much faster once they go into the dehydrator.
And for vegetables, the heat actually gets dialed back, right, to between 125 and 130 degrees Fahrenheit.
It does. And the texture metric completely changes too. We know fruit is done when it's pliable and leathery, but a dehydrated vegetable has to be completely brittle.
Like if you bend a dehydrated carrot and it doesn't immediately snap, it means it's still holding on to water activity and will spoil.
Exactly. Now, herbs require the most delicate touch of all. They are processed at very low heat, between 95 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit.
Because the goal there isn't just removing water, is it?
No, it is carefully protecting the highly volatile essential oils that give herbs their medicinal properties and flavors. If you blast basil with 135-degree heat, you will vaporize all the flavor compounds right out the exhaust vent.
Okay, let me challenge the whole nutritional premise here for a second. We are aggressively sucking the water out of these plants, applying constant heat for 10, 12, sometimes 24 hours.
Yeah.
Doesn't that prolonged exposure to heat absolutely decimate the nutritional value of the food?
It's one of the most common assumptions people make. But the chemistry actually proves otherwise. You have to look at the alternatives.
Like canning.
Right. Take industrial canning. Canning relies on extreme, prolonged thermal processing, literally boiling the food in a pressurized environment.
And that destroys things.
Intensely. That heat leaches out water-soluble minerals and actively destroys heat-sensitive vitamins. Dehydration, on the other hand, utilizes a very gentle, controlled heat.
So the low temperature is the key to preserving the chemistry.
It is. Because the heat never reaches boiling, this low and slow method preserves the vast majority of dietary fiber, trace minerals, and all your fat-soluble vitamins, so A, D, E, and K.
Oh, that's impressive.
And the most fascinating outcome is that because the water weight is entirely eliminated, the remaining nutrients become incredibly dense.
Like a superfood.
Basically. Gram for gram, a handful of dehydrated spinach or blueberries delivers a much more powerfully concentrated dose of natural antioxidants and phytochemicals than its fresh equivalent.
Okay, so we've got our pantries meticulously stocked with clean, nutrient-dense vegetarian assets.
Which is a huge win.
But humans aren't the only ones who need clean fuel.
Yeah.
This brings us to the four-legged foodies in our lives, our pets.
Yes, pet nutrition.
Because their biological engines run very differently than ours, which means the rules of preservation have to shift entirely. And for them, we're finally bringing meat to the menu.
But before we even touch the proteins, the manuals issue a stark veterinary poison warning.
Yeah, this is super important.
Engineering dehydrated treats for dogs and cats requires absolute militancy regarding what goes into the machine. Ingredients that are perfectly safe for humans can be fatal to pets.
And the list is surprisingly long. No onions, garlic, leeks, or chives under any circumstances.
None. Those specific alliums contain compounds that cause oxidative damage to a pet's red blood cells. It leads to a life-threatening condition called hemolytic anemia.
The cells literally burst.
Yeah, it's awful. You must also strictly avoid grapes and raisins, which induce acute, unexplained renal failure in dogs.
And macadamia nuts cause neurological tremors.
Right. Plus, xylitol, a common artificial sweetener, causes massive insulin spikes and liver failure. And you have to eliminate all high concentrations of salt or industrial sugars.
So pet treats must remain rigorously plain and unseasoned.
Strictly unseasoned.
With those guardrails in place, the manuals actually suggest starting with vegetarian assets that benefit canine biology, like sweet potato chew bones.
Which are fantastic because sweet potatoes are packed with fiber and beta-carotene. You slice them into very thick, raw planks.
And unlike our human vegetables, you explicitly do not blanch these, right?
Exactly. You want to preserve the raw, complex starch structure. You run those raw planks at 145 degrees Fahrenheit for a massive 10 to 14 hours.
And the resulting product is incredibly tough and rigid.
It is. The mechanical action of a dog gnawing on that rock-hard starch actually helps scrape plaque off their teeth. It acts as a brilliant natural alternative to chemically processed rawhide.
That's a great hack. But dogs and cats are ultimately optimized for animal protein.
Yeah.
So how do we safely handle raw meat in a dehydrator that only gets up to 145 degrees?
Well, you start with the right cut. Plain chicken or turkey breast is excellent, provided you strip away absolutely every microscopic trace of visible fat.
Because fat is the enemy of dehydration.
Yes, it simply does not dry out. Instead, it traps moisture underneath it, and when exposed to oxygen over time, the fat molecules break down and turn rancid.
Ruining the entire batch.
Exactly. Now, If you are looking to support a healthy coat and reduce joint inflammation, you can also do wild salmon crisps processed at 145 degrees Fahrenheit for the omega-3 fatty acids.
The safety protocols for the raw poultry really caught my eye, though, because a lot of pet owners feed their dogs a raw diet anyway.
Right.
So why do the manuals demand we flash heat pet poultry to an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit before drying, or bake it in a conventional oven at 275 degrees for 10 minutes immediately after?
It is less about the dog's stomach and more about the shared environment.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, pets are remarkably resilient to bacteria, but if they consume a piece of jerky loaded with live salmonella, they can shed those pathogens through their saliva and feces right onto your living room rug.
Which infects the humans in the household.
Exactly. That thermal kill step guarantees pathogen elimination. The texture requirements change for pets too, by the way.
Right, because human jerky is typically pulled out when it's still bendable and chewy.
But pet jerky must be completely deprived of moisture until it is bone dry and snaps cleanly like a cracker. We do that because we aren't using the massive amounts of curing salts that human jerky relies on for shelf stability.
The ultimate pet superfood mentioned in the sources, though, has to be dehydrated organ meats. Beef liver, chicken hearts.
Oh, pets go crazy for those.
You freeze the raw organ block until it's just firm enough to slice thinly, then dry it at 145 to 155 degrees. I love the analogy the text uses. Organ meats are essentially nature's multivitamin for carnivores.
It really is a concentrated powerhouse of iron, taurine, and B vitamins, completely devoid of the artificial chemical fillers found in commercial pet treats.
It is a remarkable way to upgrade an animal's diet. But all this meticulous engineering for both human and pet food is entirely useless if you fail the very last step: storage.
Oh, this is the trap.
It really is.
Correct.
You spend 14 hours extracting all this water, but if you just throw the finished apples into a loose Tupperware container on your counter, you've just reopened the microscopic water part.
Ambient humidity is a relentless enemy. If dehydrated food is exposed to the open air of your kitchen, it acts like a sponge.
So it just sucks the moisture right back out of the room.
It will slowly reabsorb the humidity from the room, raising its internal water activity right back over that 0.60 threshold, and hidden mold will bloom. This is why the manuals mandate a very specific conditioning process, particularly for fruits.
I found this conditioning phase a bit confusing at first. The instructions say you pack the cooled dried fruit loosely into clean glass mason jars, seal them tightly, and leave them on a dark counter for 7 to 10 days.
Yes.
And you have to shake the jar every single day. Why this weird daily jar shaking ritual? What does shaking a jar actually achieve against bacteria?
It comes down to the complex internal structure of the fruit itself. Think about an apple slice. The concentration of sugars near the core is different from the edges.
Right.
Because of those variables, even after 12 hours in a dehydrator, different pieces of fruit will hold slight microscopic variations in interior moisture. Some pieces will inevitably be a tiny bit wetter than others.
Okay, so when you put them all in a sealed glass environment and agitate the jar daily, you break up any microclimates.
Exactly. You are mechanically forcing that remaining moisture to release and redistribute evenly across the entire batch.
You are creating an equilibrium. And the glass gives you a visual indicator, right?
It does. You are watching for condensation. If even a hint of fog or microscopic water droplets form on the inside of the glass walls during that week, it is a glaring alarm that the overall moisture level is still too high.
Meaning the food must go back into the dehydrator.
Right. But if the glass stays perfectly clear for 10 days, the moisture has equalized safely, and the food is ready for long-term isolation.
Now, for everyday snacking, those glass mason jars are great. But if you're putting food away for genuine emergency preparedness, the sources point away from glass and toward thick foil mylar bags paired with food-grade oxygen absorbers.
Because glass lets in light, which degrades vitamins. And plastic bags are notoriously porous to oxygen over long periods.
While heavy-duty foil mylar is completely impermeable.
Yes. You drop in an iron-based oxygen absorber, heat seal the top, and it creates a vacuum-like environment devoid of the oxygen that drives oxidation and rancidity.
That extends the shelf life of low-fat dehydrated foods to 5, 10, even 15 plus years.
It's incredible. There is also a steadfast environmental rule that dictates that longevity. Every 18-degree Fahrenheit drop, which is exactly a 10-degree Celsius drop, in the ambient room temperature effectively doubles the food's shelf life.
Cool, dark, and dry is the golden triad.
Always.
Knowing that a batch of strawberries could theoretically sit on a shelf for 15 years feels like a massive leap in modern science.
No.
But the sources reveal that horizontal flow electronics and mylar bags are really just the modern, convenient application of an incredibly ancient survival tactic.
Oh, for sure. Mastering the harvest has deeply embedded spiritual and historical roots.
Yeah, the manuals actually transport us to the first century ancient Near East,
Hmm.
specifically the arid Judean wilderness around the time of Jesus.
Right. This was an unforgiving environment with blistering heat, intense sunlight, and dry desert winds. The cultures there didn't fight the climate, they weaponized it for preservation.
They didn't have plug-in dehydrators with temperature dials. They had the architecture of their own homes. Families utilized flat stone rooftops.
That thick stone absorbed massive amounts of ambient heat from the Mediterranean sun.
They would take the 7 species, the famous agricultural staples of the region, like grapes, figs, and dates, and spread them meticulously across these clean, hot stone roofs.
The wind and the radiating heat naturally drew out the moisture. They were literally turning fresh grapes into raisins right there in the open air.
And that mastery extended out to the massive commercial fishing industry operating on the Sea of Galilee.
Fish is a highly perishable, wet protein.
Right. To transport a catch inland across the desert to the crowded markets in Jerusalem without it rotting in hours, the fishermen immediately cleaned, heavily salted, and wind-dried their haul on the shores.
The salt drastically lowered the water activity, and the dry winds finished the job. The preserved protein was then packed into cool, underground clay jars to ensure entire communities survived the barren, dry seasons.
So what does this all mean? Beyond just a clever, ancient survival tactic, the sources highlight how this physical act of preservation ties directly into the Christian value of stewardship.
Yes, the idea of profoundly honoring the resources you've been given.
There's a direct reference to the Gospel of John, chapter 6, verse 12. After Jesus miraculously multiplies the loaves and fishes to feed the 5,000, the text notes he doesn't just let the crowd walk away from the mess.
He gives a highly specific command to his disciples.
Gather up the leftover fragments that nothing may be lost.
Mhm.
Dehydration is basically the physical manifestation of that command. It is the absolute prevention of waste.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources present a beautiful, profound metaphor based on 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 23.
Oh, I loved this part.
It explores the classic Christian understanding of the human makeup: spirit, soul, and body. And it aligns remarkably well with the mechanics of preservation.
The body part of the metaphor makes immediate sense.
Yeah.
The body is viewed as a physical temple.
Right. Just as you wouldn't put spoiled, rotting, or chemically laden food into your dehydrator, caring for the physical temple means fueling it, and fueling the animals in your care with pure, clean, single-ingredient food.
But then it moves deeper to the soul, which represents the mind, the emotions, and the human will.
The metaphor suggests that the soul requires the exact same quiet patience and strict discipline that dehydration demands.
Because if you try to rush the dehydration process by cranking up the heat, you ruin the food with case hardening.
And if you fail to condition the fruit in the jar, the whole batch rots from the inside out.
So the soul requires purposeful conditioning too.
Yes, you have to actively guard your thoughts against the corrupting, ambient moisture of worldly negativity, bitterness, and toxic habits.
If you leave your mind exposed to those elements, it induces moral decay, just like humidity breeds mold.
Finally, there is the spirit, the eternal core of a person.
The text describes refining the spirit in a way that sounds exactly like drawing away heavy temporary water weight.
In the spiritual life, seasons of intense refinement, the hot, dry periods, are often used to strip away heavy worldly distractions and superficial anxieties.
And what is left behind after the heat has done its work, just like a perfectly preserved piece of fruit, is a deeply concentrated, resilient, shelf-stable faith that can survive the long winters of life.
It is such a powerful framework to lay over something as simple as drying food.
It really is. We have covered an incredible amount of ground today for you. We started by looking at the microscopic physics of spoilage fighting the moisture monster and paralyzing enzymes by lowering water activity below 0.60.
We engineered highly specific, nutrient-dense vegetarian assets using precise airflow and heat.
We learned how to safely craft unseasoned, single-ingredient jerkies and durable chews tailored to the carnivorous biology of our pets.
And we traced the lineage of this practice all the way back to the hot stone rooftops of ancient Judea, discovering a profound metaphor for physical and spiritual stewardship.
It entirely transforms how you look, at the produce sitting on your counter right now.
It is no longer just food waiting to spoil. It is pure potential energy waiting to be preserved.
Exactly. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. We talked about how dehydration is fundamentally about removing the heavy temporary fluff to preserve what is truly essential.
Right.
So take that metaphor out of the kitchen for a second. What is the water weight in your own daily schedule right now? If you put your calendar in a dehydrator and stripped away all the fleeting distractions, the endless scrolling, the superficial obligations. Wait, let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
If you stripped away all those fleeting distractions, what nutrient-dense core would actually remain? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.